Welcome. I'm Sebastian Mahfood, and you're listening to WCAT Radio, the on-air wing of En Route Books and Media, bringing you the dulcet sounds of Catholic wisdom with our host, Bob Olson, who will now introduce today's show and speaker.
Presenting the open door. I have left an open door before you, which no one can close. Open to the love of God. Open to joining His stream of love for others. On our illustrious panel today, we have Dr. Rhonda Chervin, a Catholic writer in Texas. And then we have Dr. Richard Garrity from Birmingham, Alabama, professor of philosophy at EWTN, writer of books about Aristotle's Ethics, Plato's Republic, who is writing a book about Blessed Cardinal Newman's Apologetics. Dr. Jim Hannock from Los Angeles, philosophy professor, father of 5 children, pro-life activist, editor at New Oxford Review, and Commander Al Hughes from Corpus Christi, Texas, colonel in the Air Force, a married father who converted to the Catholic Church from atheism, and also has degrees in engineering and pastoral studies. And now to introduce his daughter, who's also joining us on the panel today, Commander Al Hughes. Go for it, Commander.
Thank you, Bob. Today we're going to be speaking of our experiences with travel to sacred sites. And Katie, Catherine, has just returned. Our newest member has just returned from the Philippines, from the island of Cebu. And I know there that she was with her team evangelizing literally thousands of people on the island of Cebu. And I know she's also been to a sacred site or two while she was there. So, Katie, would you like to tell us a little bit about sacred sites on the island of Cebu?
Sure. Cebu is known for housing the original statue of Santo Niño, the infant child, and it was given to the Queen of Cebu as a baptismal gift about 500 years ago from Magellan when he brought Christianity to that island and to the Philippines. And so ever since then, every feast day of Santo Niño, January 15th, they have a novena, 9-day novena, and then they have a great celebration and fiesta of the infant child, Señor Santo Niño. And so that is one of the great pilgrimage sites. People come from all over the Philippines and many Filipinos from the United States and all over the world to celebrate. It's one of the great attributes of the Philippines. It may be a third world country and very poor, but their faith is in great numbers and surpasses any financial wealth, I would say. So that was a great experience. We were there for all the festivities, and they celebrate Santo Niño towards the closing of their novena masses. They have a boat procession, which has hundreds of boats with thousands of people that are part of that, early in the morning at dawn. It starts at 6 a.m., and then it's followed by a walking procession in the city streets of Cebu. And it ends at the Basilica of Santo Niño, which is run by the Augustinians, and they were also our host while we were there for our ministry, Spirit-Filled Hearts. And so we had a grand tour of that experience because they do house the statue of Santo Niño, and we were able to venerate that statue and also have a wonderful experience of masses. And at the Sunday Mass, they call it the fiesta day, the feast day. And on that day is when they shout out all their petitions to Santo Niño. So they have many songs that they sing, and through it, they say Pete Senor, and then they shout out their petitions. And so there's about, at each Mass, there's about 20,000 people. So it's a big deal. So that was one of the sites that I saw. And the other one was I had never heard of, and I don't know if any of your listeners, unless they're Filipino, but they have the site of miracles of Our Blessed Lady. They call her Mama Mary of Lidagan, and that's in the hills of Cebu. And it has a testimony of many miracles, as well as the statue of Our Lady. It actually weeps on certain days of the year, and they are her birthday, September 8th.
Say that, Katie, say that again about the statue.
The statue of Our Lady of Lidagan.
Yes.
She weeps, so she cries tears, and it started when they built this monastery, and they had a statue of Our Lady, and they noticed that she was weeping on certain days, certain feast days. And one of them is on her birthday, September 8th, as well as October 13th, the anniversary of Our Lady of Fatima. And what else? And then they have a few other dates that which I'm not sure what they are, but August 17th and August 22nd. So that's a pretty good testimony of Our Lady's presence in this place. And it has a miraculous story in which in this about 1995 there was a monk, and he went home to his family in the Philippines, and he found out that he had a portion of land, and because he was a monk, he's not allowed to own property, so he gave his land to the Catholic Church. And in response, he asked if he could build a monastery for his order. And the Cardinal Vidal of Cebu was happy to do so. And they found a very this old rocky piece of land with nothing on it in the middle of nowhere in the Cebu provincial area. And it was given to them because it was pretty worthless. And so by their faith, they prayed. They said their fertilizer of the land were Hail Marys. So as they were trying to cultivate the land and build their monastery, an El Nino came, and so then they were able to have planting and be able to live off the land. And then it continued on where they were able to build a monastery there in which people come to venerate Our Lady because of the miracle of the statue, as well as people have many healings there, and they send in their petitions, and they send in they light candles there for petitions of family members who have been sick of cancer, and people in wheelchairs, and then they're healed. And so the walls are lined in the shrine with images of people being healed with their wheelchairs. They send in their crutches. They send in their letters of testimony of being healed of cancer and other things. And so people come from all over the Philippines to ask Our Lady for her intercession.
Fantastic. Thank you, Katie.
You're welcome.
Yeah, I understand that your that whole documentary of your trip with your team is now on our website. I haven't checked that, but I do understand it's been posted. I really appreciate you telling us about this site. How about one of the other panel members? Anybody want to jump in?
Well, I was thinking, what are the sacred sites that I'm acquainted with? Well, I think the first one is St. Joseph's Parish in Astoria. We were 2 blocks away from the church, the school was attached and the nuns were there. And we would go to school every day, and we'd go to Mass on Sundays. And it was just part of the neighborhood. And every once in a while, we had the brigade, a fife drum and bugle corps, and you'd march through the streets around the church in the neighborhood. And I wouldn't have then considered it a sacred site. It was just a site where you lived, see? But it happened to be dominated by the church. And my parents had great reverence for the church, so you're in it. You know, it becomes part of you, part of your life. You know, and not just your spiritual life or your, it's just part of your whole life. So and that actually happened. See, it happened. I graduated from grammar school in 1946, so you had that kind of presence in the church in New York City, in Astoria, St. Joseph's Parish, and thinking back on it, yeah, it was sacred, but it was also ordinary. It was just part of my life. And what strikes me now is all of that is like the churches being driven underground. Parishes are closing by the thousands. And former Carter Ratzinger, then formerly Pope, said the church is headed underground again. So, but in the Philippines, it's not underground again. It's still out there, and you can fly out there and see 20,000 people praying and the statue parading, and very visible, very much part of their lives. And I imagine for Katie, it's a rather new experience. It wouldn't have been her typical experience where she was brought up.
I had a...
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
No, Rhonda, go first.
Oh, okay. I had this little thought, I think from the Holy Spirit. Katie, you use this term third world, and I remember when we started using that word, and very soon I started feeling there's something derisive about that word, third world, because it's based on, you know, development, economic development, those terms. And I was thinking from the Catholic point of view, we might want to be countercultural and start saying, well, the first world is heaven and the second world is Jerusalem or Israel, you know, the Holy Land, and the next world, the third world is Rome, and, you know, or all the Catholic countries. And, you know, there's something... so many of these phrases, you know, are only possible because our whole way of thinking is very worldly rather than based on revelation. But in any case, no one's going to follow me on this thing, so I might as well go on to. I was thinking also, well, of course, every church is a sacred site, but I knew that's not what you meant exactly. However, I think that feeling is being revived, Richard. For instance, the Franciscan Friars of the Renewal, they go out in processions with the Eucharist through the streets wherever they live, all over the world. And so they're reviving the sense that the parish church in that neighborhood is a sacred site and that processions flow from it, that kind of thing. So, you know, I think Jim wanted to give some of his examples.
Well, what I have to say could be a comment connected with what Katie has told us. What a magnificent story. And what Rhonda is pointing out, and Richard too, and it's just a simple comment. What makes a place sacred is not geography, really, but the people there and the people who pray there. And when we look at Katie's wonderful video of what happened in the Philippines, what we mostly see are people and people praying. And when we think of Richard's account of growing up in New York City and in the neighborhood and his parents, it's the people there. And what Rhonda is telling us is we could restructure some of our language in terms of the primacy of people and people praying. And I think that gives us a sense of how to see things as they really are.
Yeah, and Jim, you make me think, the vehicle of the Holy Spirit is us, those who have received the Spirit and baptized and who are active, as the old phrase goes, active in the vineyard. The holiness of the place is directly proportional to the holiness of the people there. And so you can translate that to almost any parish anywhere with a strong priest and a holy membership of the congregation. Voila, you have a holy site, because the Holy Spirit is alive and active and fills that area with His peace and healing. So we can. It's almost as though a holy congregation attracts the holiness of God, and that's where you find healings of all types, and a site then becomes, little by time, becomes more well known, even famous, just as those sites in the Philippines. But it all goes back to the holiness of the people and their priests.
Yeah, right.
Well, of course, it all goes back to Jesus being present as God the Father, revealing Him on earth as the Son, and then in the Eucharist. And in that way, it all springs from His holiness, because, of course, our holiness is a response to God's holiness and so forth. My first experience of a kind of pilgrimage sacred site was Lourdes, and this is when I was an atheist on this tour of Europe, the Sacred Art Tour of Europe, and I was still an atheist when we hit Lourdes. And my godparents, Baldwin and Leni Schwartz, who were big disciples of Dietrich von Hildebrand, they were leading this pilgrimage, and they were afraid that I would find it tacky that they had all these religious goods tables and buying and selling at this sacred site. Well, my point of comparison for that was 42nd Street in New York, so I thought nothing of that, which I told them. But I was especially moved by this is Europe. This is 1959, but we were always reading about World War II, and the idea that there were, in the Catholic Church, there were people singing the famous Ave in Latin, but then also people singing in German and in English, and they didn't hate each other, even though they had been through World War II. And that was very stunning to me. And I just felt the beauty of the singing, and again, this sense that I've mentioned all the time of Keats' line, "Beauty is truth." So I was sort of very thrilled by that sacred site.
I guess in this thundering silence, I'll mention the city of Montreal. Mark Twain visited Montreal, and when he came back, and he said or wrote that you couldn't throw a rock without hitting a church window. And I've been up there a couple of times, and I think he's just about right. It's due to the history of Montreal. It started out French and then English, and so you find it's a city of cathedrals. There's a French cathedral built in the old days. There's an Irish Catholic cathedral there. And then the Anglicans have their cathedral, and then there are dozens, literally, of other churches. There is even a 1/4 scale model of the Vatican, of St. Peter's Basilica in Montreal, and at 1/4 of the Vatican site, it's still huge. I spent some time, a week or two, just wandering around on foot, going from church to church, because I had an interest in, this is even when I was barely into the faith. I had always had a fascination with church architecture, so that's the first thing I do. But specifically, I had, I guess you'd call it a holy moment, even though, and I think it was in the French cathedral. It was in there. It was empty. There was no service going. A few other tourists wandering around. And down toward the front on the left side, there was an anteroom that was partitioned off by iron gratings, so you could see in there, but you couldn't go in there. And so I walked over and looked in there, and it was the burial site of all the old French bishops, going all the way back to the beginning. And so these were, just lines of crypts back there of all the ancient bishops. And I looked at that, and I'm about as unemotional a guy as you can meet, and I burst out in tears in a kind of a deep, awesome feeling of being in the presence of sanctity, seeing all of these crypts there with all these old bishops. And it was a very moving moment for me that I'll never forget. So at least for me, that was a sacred site, and at least for the 15 minutes or so that I stood there crying.
Well, that's fascinating because, as you said, and I can believe that, you wouldn't be that emotional type of guy, see? And yet you go around. Now, what you described, I think I've experienced. So you have a grating, you look at, and whatever it might be. In this case, you said it was the tombs of the old bishops. Now, I doubt if that I would get crying about that, see, but there might be something else. But my point is this: who knows how people are going to be affected by something sacred? You don't know. It's hard to predict. So you get a guy like yourself, not emotional, wouldn't be given to those kind of displays, and you look in, and this happens, and you move tremendous, and you'll never forget it. And so anyway, that's my thought on it.
Yeah, I would recommend anybody, particularly living in the Northeast, from Pennsylvania all the way to Maine. Montreal's not far away, and it is an amazing city. There's also just behind the first line of hills is the great famous St. Joseph Oratory, which is an incredible place. It's a huge granite building built on a low hill behind the first range, and complete with 125 concrete steps leading up to it, I think was the number. And no matter when you go there, you'll find people on their knees climbing those 125 steps on their knees. And then you get to the top, and you go in, I guess it's kind of like the basement, the crypt, portion of this huge church, and there's a room in there that's so hot you can't stand it because it's hot because of the thousands of candles burning there. And as you get used to the gloom in the room, because it's pretty dark except for all these rows and rows of candles, you begin to see crutches and wheelchairs lying all over the place where people, hobbled in, crawled in, were wheeled in and walked out. and it's been going on for 100 years or more there at the oratory. It's an incredible place, and if you did nothing else in Montreal, catch the bus over the hill and go to the St. Joseph Oratory, because there's great power there, and there's also their resident saint is buried there. I forget his name, but he was actually the janitor or something. I don't know, but he was a very holy man. I don't remember the total story, but I would say for anybody in the east of the country, go to Montreal and spend at least a week there, immersed in all of these great cathedrals and the oratory.
Oh, well, a similar thing about people crawling on their knees up the steps, I experienced at Our Lady of Guadalupe Shrine in Mexico City, and they're cheap fares. If you live in the Southwest, they're cheap fares to Mexico City. And I was there with my husband was on a business trip. This was before he became so deathly ill from asthma, late onset asthma. So I went along because I wanted to see Mexico. I'd never been in Mexico City, and I especially wanted to go to the Shrine of Our Lady of Guadalupe. So there's this huge plaza, and I see all these Hispanics, and they're crawling on their knees all the way from the opening of the plaza up to the church where the tilma is of Juan Diego, right? And they have sometimes someone else in the family has a towel that they put under their knees to catch the blood as they go up. They go up there. So I'm looking at this and I'm thinking, oh, would I have the courage to do such a thing, because I hate pain, I get hysterical just going to the dentist. So I thought, well, I can't do this. So a taxi arrives, and this Anglo woman, pale skin. Now, I was then about 30 years old. This woman was about 60. Gray hair, curly gray hair and a perm, this alabaster skin. And I was thinking maybe the Mexicans just have harder knees than we have. So she jumps out of the taxi and starts crawling on her knees with no towel all the way up, you see. So then I said, well, I better do it too. If she can do it, I can do it. And so what I did, this was just before I was starting to teach full-time philosophy, and I prayed all the way up on my knees. I prayed for all my future students, and I prayed for everyone in the family. And it was a very deep experience, and I didn't get hysterical from the pain at all. I got a special grace, I guess. And I always identified because of that with the Hispanics in the United States who on Good Friday crawl sometimes through the church. And also crawl the stations that way. Crawl the stations meaning they go on their knees. They don't get up between each station. They just keep on their knees going from station to station. And how some Anglos look at that and consider it to be some sort of melodramatic, exhibitionism, And I think instead that it's a very, very important thing that it links the body, more of the body with the soul, and it's just a beautiful thing. So I sometimes do it when no one else is in the church, because I know if I'm doing it with other people in the church, if they're not of that culture, they'll think I'm an egocentric exhibitionist, which I am, but that's this particular thing. I think
right.
It is good to do.
I would like to affirm that statement.
That this one is good. I think that's not the statement he wanted to confirm. But now, since we two live together in Corpus Christi, and I see Al every day practically, just you wait. You're going to see me do it. You can laugh.
Okay. That's okay, because I'm running your taxi.
Well, Jim here, I'd like to, what should I say, reflect on some underground themes. Richard mentioned that the church underground, where he was raised, now is seeming to be underground, and where Katie has been, it's above ground and vibrant and alive. Underground and undercurrents. Al was speaking of Montreal, and when I think of Montreal today, I think immediately of the whole of Canada. And when I think of Canada today, I think of in a really unrestricted acceptance now, unanimously supported by the Canadian Supreme Court, or the more specific equivalent, I think that's what it's called, though, of euthanasia. It just swept over the country. And there's a fellow who I've had opportunity to meet who's centered in Canada, who comes and speaks regularly in the United States and Canada and elsewhere. And I think of what he's gone through in this whole process. So you have the above-ground beauty of the shrines and churches in Montreal, and you have the fundamental moral collapse of Canadian society with regard to euthanasia and the secular mentality that leads to that. Or flipping back even to the Philippines, you have a new head of state there who has obscene tirades that he launches against the clergy in the Philippines, not to mention other public figures, but it's an extraordinary sort of a thing. So I'm struck by the sharp contrasts, and this is a bit of a wandering from the point, but chances for resurgence in France now. The leading figure in what we could call, for want of a better word, the conservative political structure there, the leading figure is openly Catholic, calls attention to the Catholic heritage of France, but again, he has to do so in a way that's so sharp and raw-edged. On one side, he has the nationalists who want to deport every Muslim in France, or at least everyone that they could, and then on the other side, the Socialist Party, which in France, like the Liberal Democrats in the United States, it's strongly advocates abortion as an ordinary sort of thing, and strongly advocates same-sex unions as a perfectly ordinary thing. And sometimes it seems as if we're cast into to some sort of macabre dance of knives slashing in different directions, and somehow or other we're supposed to work our way through it. And then last, and I'll shut up, when I think of the sacred sites I've been to, well, I have been to St. Peter's, but the one that really strikes me, and hey, Richard, is the Church of St. Mary and St. Nicholas in Littlemore, just outside of Oxford, where Newman was before he came to join the Roman Catholic Church. And just down the walk from the church is a place called The College. And really what it looks like is a old-time mini warehouse sort of thing. It's been reworked now for the sake of tourists and the like. But Newman, too, found himself in just the sharpest kind of political battles and religious battles. And I guess when things strike us today, as they often strike me, as apocalyptic, you'll find that again and again and again and again in the course of our history.
Well, I think it would be strange if we didn't mention experience of the Holy Land as a sacred site. And I think I always say when seminarians are looking forward to ordination, if they've never been to the Holy Land, I say tell everyone, instead of giving you other things for your ordination, to give you a pilgrimage to the Holy Land, because it is so incredible to be there. And I've been there twice, once not on a pilgrimage and once on a pilgrimage. And people had told me beforehand, look, Rhonda, you're going to be disappointed in the churches. It's nothing like beautiful French Gothic churches or, things like that you love. It's not like that, and that's true. But I found that the sense that remained with me the first time was just the Holy Land, the word the Holy Land, that somehow, in spite of all the battles going on there, and incidentally, it looks just like New Testament times, where you had all this hate going on between the different groups. You have, all this hate between, battling forces in Israel. Police, the first time I went, there's a policeman on every corner, which actually makes you feel safe. But in any case, the only people who look nice there, or look loving there, are the pilgrims, but also the Arabs in the souks. The souks is the open market. The ones who sell to tourists are very, very friendly and warm. In any case, but the thing that remained with me is this sense, the Holy Land. This is where Jesus actually walked. And you could see this is the Lake of Galilee. And you never forget these scenes, which many of them are the same as his time. I mean, you could see groups of, shepherds walking in the hills right in Jerusalem. You're in a hotel and you look out and there's a shepherd with sheep walking down the hill. So it just makes the whole New Testament and Old Testament come alive for you scenically. So I highly recommend that as a sacred site.
This is Al again. The picture I have of the Holy Land is a picture of our Katie sitting on a camel with a big grin. She was grinning, not the camel. Right. That's one of my favorite pictures. But Katie also leads tours over there and has with her team of evangelists. And so, Katie, would you like to mention one of the Holy Land sites that you visited?
Sure. Probably when the Church of the Holy Sepulchre is probably one of the best experiences I think a person can have. getting there and going through the Muslim area where you have to cross over. The Muslims have spiritual control of the Temple Mount. And because of that, you have to go through an area where you're not allowed to pray. No one's allowed to touch each other. You're not allowed to have any Christian devotions or crosses or anything like that, rosaries with you, or a Bible. And then that's kind of that's kind of like the beginning of your spiritual walk to the site where, Jesus died on the cross and also rose from the dead. And so I kind of look at that as part of your sacrifice of going through this area where you have people watching you and waiting for you to break rules so that they can come out, and they come out of nowhere and they will just scare you. We had an elderly lady who was having a hard time walking, and one of the other pilgrims was helping her walk through the cobbled area, and a man came out of nowhere and said, "You may not help her," to this gentleman, and you have to obey. They have those spiritual rights there. And so just getting to being able to walk the Stations of the Cross that Jesus walked, that was kind of our first station. That was our cross to pick up, because we're not used to that as Americans, or being able to express yourself how we like spiritually wherever we go. And then you get to walk the different, you get to pick up a cross, and everyone gets to take turns and carry the cross to the different stations. And I believe it's the last 4 are in the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. And so that's not an easy feat either, because when you're trying to climb up a very narrow stairwell, and you have people of all different physical abilities trying to get up, it's very steep and to get to the cross, because he was on a hill. And that's where his cross was. And he was crucified there. And so being able, everyone gets their turn. There's an altar, and above it is, I think it's mostly in silver, is the crucifix and a painted face for the place of his face, and his hands are there on the crucifix, but his body's in silver. And below that is the altar, and below the altar is the place where the cross was placed. And so you get to put your hand, and you can pray there. It's very brief, so have your prayers ready, and then you can light a candle. And then you go on and you see where Jesus was laid to be anointed for burial. And people venerate that, and it's beautiful. And you can place your holy objects there as well in that sacred spot. And then you can also, I think as of right now it's closed, but when we were there, you're able to go into the tomb where he was buried and place your hand where he was laid. And so, again, that's another place to pray. And if you're in touch and you're prayerful, you can really understand and ask the Holy Spirit to guide you through that process, to make it impactful in a spiritual way. And so that was one of the most impactful places I've been to. And the other one was going to Bethlehem, which is another...
Katie, let me jump in. Bob, we haven't heard from you. Do you want to share an experience of a visit to a sacred site? Bob?
Oh, he might be on mute.
Okay.
I have a question for Katie. I'm trying to get clear in my mind this area that okay. Go ahead. This area where there were these sharp restrictions. Could you explain that again?
Yeah, I was curious too. I mean, that sounds amazing. Go ahead, Katie.
Sure. It's best when you go to the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, it's best to get there early. There is a security station that everyone must go through. So when you go through the security station, they go through your bag. You go through a metal detector, and our tour guide in advance told us, about what we're able to do and what we're not able to do. And so we were already prepared. The first time I went to the Holy Land, someone didn't heed those instructions, and so because they wanted to place all the rosaries in the holy sacred places, but she just had to set all these rosaries in her purse. And so most of us had stuck them in our pockets and, or around our necks or on our person where it wouldn't set off the metal detectors. And so she had put it in her purse, and they saw them, and they confiscated all of her rosaries.
Oh, gee. That's really something.
Yeah, and so I hear a lot of static or something. So then the other thing is that you go to this holy sacred area, which it was the place of the temple before it was destroyed, and there is I think it's a pentagon-shaped building that looks like a mosque, but it's not. But it is a place of prayer, and only the Muslims can go there and pray. And it's there's a lot of weird sound. And then there's also within this building, they believe is the Dome of the Rock. So that's what it's called. And there's a big dome, and it's golden on the outside of this building, and inside they believe is the entrance, the Holy of Holies. However, the Jewish say that's not the place according to the description of where it's located in the Bible. So they actually believe it's somewhere else, but the Muslims believe it's in this one specific spot. And so they have spiritual rights to it. And that happened because the prime minister, who was Jewish, at the time after the war, as a gift or as a peace offering, allowed the Muslims to have the spiritual right to the Dome of the Mount, the Dome of the Rock, and that Temple Mount area. And so ever since then, they've had those spiritual rights and can tell people whatever they want, and they have the right to do that. So they go. That's all they have, as far as power there. And so that's the sense of pride, and that's just how it is there. And so when you walk through, it's a long. Think of it as a large piazza area, and so it's just cobblestoned, and so there are people who actually monitor the area, and they're actually paid. They are paid to keep an eye on everyone, and if anyone breaks any of these rules, they basically come out of nowhere. It's like it's disarming when it happens, because when the gentleman went to go help a woman who was stumbling, this person came out of nowhere and started, chastising, saying, "You can't do that. You can't touch. You can't help." And so the woman, and even a woman, can't help her. So no one was able to help this person walk and assist them. So for us, as Americans or as any human being, it seems the right thing to do is to help someone. But they like to make themselves known when they can, and so it's. I see it as a pride. I see it as immature. But it is what it is, and you just realize, be thankful that where you live is where you live, and I'm not getting political at all, but be thankful for the right to express your freedom to practice your faith in public places or in a church.
When did you make that trip to the Holy Land? How long ago?
I went last May, so it's almost been a year with my second trip. And my first trip was in 2013.
Well, I went, probably the last time I was there was maybe 10 years ago, but there was nothing like that then. So this is something fairly new, huh?
I don't know. Maybe there's different ways to get to the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. Did you do
we didn't experience anything like that.
Of the Cross? No. And they may have just gotten more, they may have started to make it more apparent more recently. And so, for whatever reason, for political reasons, but they have always had spiritual rights there since the Prime Minister gave that. This was many years ago. But it just might be more strict now than when you were there.
Commander Al, you asked me if I had anything to add. When we talk about Montreal and the St. Joseph Oratory, the saint was Saint Andre Bessette.
Yes. Uh-huh.
And he had been a janitor. He was a doorkeeper. He did work in some of the textile mills, even in Connecticut here.
Oh, okay.
In his early days. But there is a pilgrimage. There's many pilgrimages that go not only to Montreal, but then they go to St. Anne's in Quebec and another site called Three Rivers. And there's a family here. There's a family here in Connecticut that they've been sponsoring this tour, and it goes from generation to generation. Over 70 years, they've been doing this tour to those three places in Canada.
Yes, I've been to St. Anne. I don't remember much about it. It was a long time ago, but I've been to St. Anne as well. It's Montreal, that area. There are a number of holy sites that really deserve a pilgrimage for people who can get there.
Another site fairly close to Connecticut here is the North American Martyrs Shrine at Orisville in upstate New York. And then we also went to the Martyr Shrine in Canada. And those are very interesting also.
Well, if you just to put in a very funny joke that I heard when I first became a Catholic, people would tell me these funny jokes about Catholic stuff. And this one involves the Shrine of St. Anne. So it goes this way. This man was trying to illegitimately get money off his insurance because of some accident that he had, based on I broke my leg, all these things. Well, the court case, the insurance company didn't want to pay, so the court case was postponed. So now the judge is judging this case, and he looks at this guy and he says, "But you seem fine. You seem to have recovered very quickly." And he says, "Yeah, I went up to the Shrine of St. Anne and I was totally healed. You still have to pay."
Beautiful.
What struck me, going back to Katie's story and then the clarification, what you have here is in one local place, really tight, like Jerusalem, violently different people, contrasts. I mean, that business of Christians, and then you go through a Muslim area, and then you have enforcers making sure there are no rosaries or anything like that, like they have Sharia law, see. And yet they haven't blown each other up. You haven't had the one wipe out the other. Somehow they're still cheek by jowl. Now you think of France or places where they have areas where it's Sharia law, and then you have other areas and it's the national law. Now, you can't mix those two are violently opposed. I mean, you just can't blend them, see? But so there they are there, cheek by jowl. Now, somehow, in Jerusalem, they've worked out some kind of arrangement. I could see a Christian coming in, inexperienced, and then running into this guy, say you can't do this. I could see a fist fight coming right off the bat. Well, no, so it's an example of really somehow big contradictions, not leading to annihilation of either one, which is quite a thing to see.
Well, I think it's a very difficult thing because the annihilation is constantly being threatened. The Jews are constantly being threatened with the elimination of their tiny little state.
Right.
And in many ways, it seems like we live on borrowed time.
Yeah.
Well, speaking of time, I think we're at the end of our time for today. And Commander Al, maybe you want to share with us what's coming up next week.
Right. Yeah, we are on borrowed time here. Today, last week and today, we've been talking about our panel experiences. First, the sacred music, and now today, sacred sites. One more. We're going to have one more discussion in this series. Next week, the panel will discuss their experience of dreams as a message from God. Dreams as a message from God. So that should be a pretty interesting topic for the hour next week.
I want to hear that dream you had again. I don't know. Actually, it wasn't a dream. Before you went to bed one night, you said, "I want the Holy Spirit."
Oh yes. Yeah. And I got it. I got it an hour later. Yeah. We can talk about that.
It wasn't a dream, though, really, because you woke up and it happened, right?
That's correct. It was not a dream.
Okay.
I was wide awake.
Well, I'm looking forward to hearing that again.
Okay.
So, Rhonda, you want to give us a nice one of your interesting closes with prayer?
Certainly. So, Jesus, we thank you for these holy, holy places. And you know that we are humans with bodies and 5 senses, and that in our spiritual life, the 5 senses cooperate with the soul. So you know that most humans can't just go into a trance, wipe out the whole world, and just experience God as pure spirit. I mean, some do have those graces, but very few. So most of us need things like shrines and miracles and places where we can see other people experience miracles in order to encourage us on our walk from this world to the next world. But even in the next world, we are told there'll be a new heaven and a new earth. So we're always going to, our bodies and our souls will experience at the same time the wonders of your glory. Amen.
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 And we'll see you again next week, same time, same station. In the meantime, may God bless each and every one of you. In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen.
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 Bye.
We hope you enjoyed the program and will join us back for another show on WCAT Radio. This is Sebastian Mahfood. Good day.